Today I will share how I maximize the Avenza MAPublisher Toolkit to map my memories of Australia. During this presentation, I will discuss my workflow and how I use the various tool sets to produce a cartographic product. I lived in Brisbane from 2008 to 2011. During that time, I worked as a senior spatial analyst for GHD, which afforded me the opportunity to visit beautiful places across Eastern Australia. The City Cat was my primary form of transportation that often ferried me to the Brisbane city centre, shown in the lower left photo, where the GHD home office is located. These photos provide an overview of the geographies that I visited in Tasmania and New South Wales. The Queensland and New South Wales beaches that I visited were pristine. The rainforests that I hiked in were filled with birdsong, lush vegetation, and gorgeous waterfalls. The Aboriginal rock art sites that I visited at Carnarvon Gorge reflect a long history of human occupation. This map of memories is a tribute to my experience in Australia to honor the people that I corresponded with across the sea, the people that I worked with, and the beautiful places I had the opportunity to visit. This is the workflow that I have found to be most efficient for producing a cartographic product. I start by researching the concept, then I acquire, import, and explore the available data. Next, I generalize and simplify the existing data and create additional data as needed. Then I symbolize the data, add labels, and integrate map elements to complete the map. The data that I selected to be included in the map was from Natural Earth, Geoscience Australia, and the Government of Australia, Department of Agriculture, and the Environment. When preparing to create a map, it helps to think from the end. It is necessary to ask questions like, what is the message that I wish to communicate? Which technique is most appropriate to symbolize this message? What data do I need? What projection would be appropriate for my map scale? With the answers to these questions, I am able to start the process of acquiring and importing data. I set up an artboard in Adobe Illustrator, activate the MAPublisher toolbar, and use the multiple data import tool to facilitate the import process. To establish the baseline, I import the Natural Earth Country Administrative Boundary layer. During the Add phase, I select Filtering Options and set up a query to import the boundaries for Australia. I select Create Map View using Editor from the Method drop-down menu and then click the pencil to set up the map view. I first set the destination projection to Australian Albers, and then the scale. Then I click OK and evaluate the import data. I make adjustments to the artboard to fit around the extent of the data, which establishes the preliminary extent to spatially filter the global data during import. Now that I have the baseline established, I can add in the rest of the global data using the existing map view as a reference for spatial extent, scale, and projection. All that I need to do is set the method to use existing map view and document, check the spatial filter, select crop, then click on the globe icon and reference the map view. Now that I have my global data imported, I can import the more detailed Australian data using attribute queries. I discovered that it was necessary to convert the hydrological data stored in a geodatabase to a shapefile format in order to have access to the attribute filter during import to set up a query to import only the features that I wanted to show on my map. Even with those filters applied, it took an hour to import the features due to the detail. I discovered by assessing the data attributes that I could filter it further by querying the features that were perennial, which made sense for the scale of my map. So I imported the hydrological data again using more complex attribute queries and chunked the dataset into smaller bits, which improved the import time considerably. I used the attribute filter to query out features that are greater than 500 square meters and reduced the number of vertices in the simplification settings for the Collaborative Australian Protected Area Database features. I have found it useful to start with simplicity, to be intentional about selecting only data that is appropriate to include in the map with respect to the character of the data as well as the scale of the map and the map theme. Using a combination of simplification with spatial and attribute filters upon import improves software performance and reduces file size. When producing a map, it is important to keep data organized and label the content of the data layer clearly. The data should be placed in label, point, line, and polygon order to ensure legibility. The Map Properties toolset provides useful functionality for the data exploration phase. With the Map Info tool, I can access the projection and scale of the map, and with the MAPublisher log tool, I can access the processing history. With the Map Layers tool, I can see the map layers grouped according to the geometry of the data, and there are modifiable notes attached to each layer in this view that provide access to the available metadata. The Attribute tool provides a means to evaluate the attributes. In this example, I imported elevation point data from a global dataset using the artboard extent as the spatial filter. By having access to the attributes, I was able to quickly identify the elevation points that were outside of Australia and remove them from the map. With Map Attributes functionality, I was able to add a new column to the protected area dataset and use the Apply Expression functionality to calculate the percent of protected land area type. Assuming that the GIS area field is accurate, I calculated the percentages to gain insight into the allocation of land that is protected by legislation. The functionality provided by this toolset is highly valuable with respect to building a foundation for producing a map, providing access to the attributes, and a means to evaluate software performance throughout the entire process. The functionality of the geoprocessing toolset can be utilized to enhance or simplify the cartographic output, or to provide analytical information to enrich features for the purposes of categorization, symbolization, or statistical summarization. The geoprocessing toolset provides useful functionality for the generalization and simplification phase. I utilized the Area tool to aggregate the hydrological features based on type and name. By aggregating the data based on the name field, I could efficiently label named lake features while also reducing the number of features significantly. I further generalize and simplify the protected area features to facilitate ease of symbolization by performing an area join based on type, which reduced the number of features from 3,082 to 58. Then I used the Attribute tool to add a field and classify the 58 types into 9 categories, which provided the basis for the final area join. In order to get a sense of how far the places that I visited were from Brisbane, I created distance buffers around Brisbane in 10-kilometer increments up to 2,000 kilometers, and then performed a spatial join between the buffers and the places that I visited. These are the 10-kilometer concentric buffers I constructed around Brisbane using the Buffer tool. I was able to perform a spatial join between my postcard places and the buffers, but due to the nature of how the buffers are constructed, I noted that it was important to specify in the attributes parameter of the tool to assign the smallest value from the buffer within width field as the buffer attribution for each feature. With the MAPublisher buffer and spatial join functionality, I was able to have a sense of the approximate distance to the places that I visited. I found area join to be an effective way to simplify and generalize data. Using the Simplify tool during and after import notably improved software performance. The buffering and spatial join functionality were also useful in providing further insight into the spatial relationships that contributed to communicating the message in my map theme. In my experience, time invested in research is time saved in production. I evaluated sources, data lineage, scale of data compilation, data currency, attribution, and accuracy where possible. I cross-referenced multiple data sets from different sources to determine which data is the most appropriate for my map theme. The MAPublisher data creation toolset can be very useful for quickly creating data to fill in data gaps or enhance the map theme. The data creation component in my instance was associated with my primary theme. I experimented with the Find and Add Places functionality. However, I noted that these features are perceived as graphics by the geoprocessing spatial join tool, so it is not possible to perform a spatial join with data that is created in this way. As such, I mapped my postcard places using Google My Maps to locate and geocode the locations of places that I visited, and then exported the data layer to a KMZ format, which is one of the many data formats that MAPublisher can import. I also use the area plotter tool to create a polygon when I finalize the extent of the map as a basis to further crop the data. The data creation toolset functionality makes it easy to geocode when data is in tabular format. Georeference data that is in an unprojected raster format, plot points or areas, create centroids, calculate statistics to gain insight into the character of the data, and even create a record of the RGB values associated with each feature. Resources such as colorbrewer.org can provide guidance with the selection of appropriate and accessible color palettes. Halos can be applied to increase legibility or enhance features. Symbols can be imported and customized. Visual hierarchy is a component of cartographic communication. And the filters in the theme sheets provide the query-based functionality to render the symbology quantitatively and qualitatively. I use the thematic toolset to set up style sheets, create legends, and apply halos. I wanted the palette that I created to represent Australia, so I selected these two photos from my collection to sample colors from in order to build Australian water and earth-themed color palettes. There are tons of swatches available within Adobe. You can seek those swatches and integrate those rather than create your own, but I chose to create my own by using those photos. And basically, this is the selection of swatches that I created that are in the active palette, which enables me to access them in the style sheets. Once the swatches are created and the symbols are added to the swatch and symbol panels, I'm ready to create my style sheets. I symbolize the elevation points using an imported symbol of a hill feature that is proportionally scaled to reflect the relative height in comparison to other elevation benchmarks. These are hill symbols which are proportionally sized in relation to elevation categories. Mount Kosciuszko is the highest elevation in Australia, so this image contains the largest hand-drawn hill symbols. The rest of the symbols are proportionally smaller. This is an example of setting up a more complex query to symbolize based on multiple combined attributes. I batch generated rules for the generalized land types that I created using area join and then made modifications to the visual properties, varying the hue and opacity to render 6 of the generalized categories on the map. Creating a legend is possible using the Map Themes menu. I select the theme sheet that I would like to create the legend for and then select Create Legend from the drop-down menu. From there I can rename the labels and specify the font settings. Halos can be applied to point, line, or polygon features. I applied a halo to the populated place data to integrate it into the composition. It is a subtle effect, but it does make a difference. I also decided to apply a halo to the coral reef dataset because it was linear and I wanted to render these features with more of a sense of breadth and in such a way that it would integrate into the map composition. The coral reef dataset shown on the left is the original, and the dataset shown on the right was enhanced by a halo effect, which helped the coral reef stand out in contrast with the bathymetry. Creating a palette to render point, line, and polygon data and adding these swatches or symbols to the active palette must be completed before they will become available in the visual properties of the style sheets. Halos are an easy way to increase legibility, and utilizing the attribute filters helps implement visual hierarchy design strategies as well. From a cartographic design perspective, text and typography are a key component of producing an effective map product. Research on fonts and selecting complementary fonts for the title, labels, and supplemental text can enhance a map considerably. With all of the symbology created, I have the framework to use the MAPublisher labeling toolset to specify font type, size, color, and set up placement rules that will reduce conflicts in relation to the dynamics of the existing peripheral symbology. LabelPro is the main tool that I use from the label toolset. While this functionality requires additional licensing, the time it saves is well worth the investment. I created filters based on scale rank to provide a basis for scaling the labels for the marine areas. And I used blue labels to represent the water features, brown labels for the terrain features, and green labels for the park features. This is an example of applying labels qualitatively using color as the visual variable to facilitate effective cartographic communication. Placement, fitting, and conflict avoidance rules are available in LabelPro and help position the labels fairly efficiently to reduce overlap. Label placement rules vary depending on the geometry of the feature that is being labeled and are intended to reduce visual conflicts and overlaps in the map. I use the expression builder to create filters for the capital cities and populated places. Then I can label the capital cities with a larger font than the populated places. Here's an example of labeling features quantitatively by using font size to differentiate smaller communities from larger communities. The functionality of LabelPro makes it easy to create filters to implement visual hierarchy communication strategies. It also saves time and reduces conflicts with the functionality to set placement rules and obstacles and identify obstacles. From a cartographic design perspective, I recommend only integrating map elements that communicate information that supports the map purpose. I integrate the map elements using color choices that harmonize with the rest of my map composition and size them in such a way that they do not detract from the subject matter. The layout toolset provides functionality to create various map elements. The graticule is fairly easy to set up with settings that will help me integrate this reference framework into my map design. I use measurement units and labels that are easy to translate and intervals that make sense in relation to the scale of my map. Here is a view of my map with the graticule applied. The color is subtle, but when you zoom in 100%, you can easily see the grid lines and labels. The scale bar settings enabled me to match the scale bar and fonts to my theme, as well as create measurement intervals of my choice. I didn't incorporate a north arrow, but I have included the workflow here for you. This is the title block that I created for the map. I decided to echo the postcard theme in the title block while also integrating the introductory text, scale bar, protected area, legend, and source statement. The MAPublisher layout toolset provides useful functionality for finalizing the map surrounds and integrating indexes for maps that require a way to communicate more detail. There is additional functionality summarized here that I did not incorporate into my workflow due to the nature of the map theme that would be very useful in varying contexts of different projects. I have learned that investing the time to learn more about the functionality of Avenza MAPublisher Toolkit will ultimately save time and improve the quality of the cartographic output. While researching the full functionality of Avenza MAPublisher, I evaluated the tools in relation to the purpose of my map and discovered more efficient workflows. Research, experimentation, and planning based on what I have learned has been a key component to successfully maximizing the software functionality and increasing efficiencies. The integration of Avenza MAPublisher with Adobe Illustrator enables us to access the combined functionality of a GIS and a digital design software. Focusing on maximizing those combined strengths is the way forward. This is the map that I produced to preserve memories of my experience in Australia. Thank you for your attention.